So today we are going to start with the review of organic chemistry, and here we are going to start from the basics, okay? So there'll be a lot of stuff that you know, and then slowly, hopefully by the time we finish this chapter, you will figure out that we have learned quite a lot of new stuff, right? Say for example, you've heard about DNA, okay, but you don't know what the structure of DNA is, right? Or do you know? Everybody knows that, or you don't, okay? At least I didn't know. I didn't take molecular biology in high school, so I didn't know, right? So first we start off by defining elements, all right? You all know what that is, all right? Elements cannot be broken down or converted into other substances by chemical means. Then we give the usual definition of an atom, smallest particle of an element that it still retains its distinctive chemical properties. Then we talk about molecules, which are formed by two or more atoms of the same element or of different elements combining together. And then, of course, in addition to an atom, right, you also have subatomic particles, and here I'm just listing the ones that we need, okay? Like protons, which are the positively charged subatomic particles. They have a mass of 1 and a charge of +1. Neutrons have a mass of 1 and a charge of 0. Electrons have a mass of 0 and a charge of -1, right? And we also know that the protons and the neutrons reside inside the nucleus, while the electrons revolve around the nucleus in certain orbits, right? You know that from your basic chemistry, right? So nothing new here. Maybe you learned that many, many years ago, you know, in the prehistory, but it's there in your historic or prehistoric memory, okay? So you haven't erased it, okay, completely. So then we go to the atomic number. That's the number of protons in the nucleus of an atom, right? And here we give you some examples. For example, hydrogen has an atomic number of 1. Because it has only 1 proton in its nucleus. Oxygen has an atomic number of 8. Carbon has an atomic number of 6. Nitrogen has an atomic number of 7. Phosphorus has an atomic number of 15. Sodium has an atomic number of 11. And calcium has an atomic number of 20, right? So anybody guess why we pick these particular elements and not... Because there are many more elements, right? Why did we highlight just these? In what? In organic compounds, yeah. In living things, these are the elements that you'll find over and over again, okay? So what is the atomic weight? The atomic weight is the total number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. For example, hydrogen has got an atomic weight of 1, because if you look at the hydrogen nucleus, there is 1 proton, 1 electron, no neutron, right? Well, not the nucleus. If you look at the hydrogen atom, you have 1 proton, 1 electron, no neutron, okay? So the atomic weight is 1, okay? So 1 proton, so that's going to give you 1. Atomic weight is also the mass of an atom relative to that of a hydrogen atom, right? You also know that, okay? From the same considerations. Now we further know that an atom is electrically neutral, so the number of positively charged particles, that is protons, must be equal to the number of negatively charged particles, that is electrons. Again, nothing new so far. Now, for a particular element, the number of protons, right, in the nucleus is actually fixed, but the number of neutrons can vary. For example, carbon atoms usually have 6 protons and 6 neutrons in the nucleus, so the atomic weight of regular carbon is 12, right? However, carbon atoms possessing 6 protons and 8 neutrons, where the carbon atom is going to have an atomic weight of 14, they exist, okay? And if you, so, and in fact, this carbon with an atomic weight of 14 is the basis of this technique, which is known as carbon dating. Because if you want to find out how old a fossil is, okay, you will see how, if it's, because these things have a half-life. As engineers, you know that, okay? I mean, like, there is only, so if you have multiple isotopes with different atomic weights, one of them is stable and the others will radioactively decay towards it, okay, with certain time constants. And so you can use that to figure out the age of a fossil, right? So isotopes are atoms of the same element with varying numbers of neutrons. And usually one isotope of an element is the most stable one. The others will radioactively decay towards it with time. All right. Now the protons and the neutrons are held together tightly in the nucleus, and the electrons revolve around the nucleus in certain discrete orbits that are called shells. Okay. So that's the result of all this quantum mechanics and all that stuff. Right. And this is a schematic diagram of an atom, where you have the nucleus that contains the positively charged particles, the protons, and the neutrons, the neutral particles, all right? And then around this, the electrons are moving around in certain orbits, all right? So there is this first shell, which can accommodate up to 2 electrons. Then the second orbit can accommodate up to 8 electrons. The third orbit can accommodate up to 8 electrons and so on. Okay, and there is a formula, which you may have come across in high school about how many electrons can be accommodated in each of these orbits. Okay, there's a formula. So now, so if you look at helium, right? Helium is an inert gas, right? It has an atomic number of 2. So only 2 electrons, right? So it will have, if you look at an helium atom, it's going to have protons and neutrons here, and then only 2 electrons completely filling up the innermost shell, okay? And that is the reason why helium is unreactive, right? It's an inert gas, right? It doesn't react with anything. Another example is neon, right? That has an atomic number of 10. So again, in the first shell, 2 electrons will go. In the next shell, 8 more electrons will go. So it has a completely filled up outer shell, right? As a result, neon also is not going to react with anything. Argon has an atomic number of 18, right? Again, it's 2 plus 8, 10, plus 8, 18. So the outermost shell is completely filled up. So there is no scope for electron transfer, electron sharing, whatever, right? And that's also an inert gas. Any questions? Yeah. No problem, no problem. Okay, now we will look at how chemical bonds are formed by the transfer and sharing of electrons, right? So here we look at sodium, right, which has got an atomic number of 11. So there are 11 protons in the nucleus, and then there are 11 electrons. So 2 of these electrons will go in the innermost shell. The next one can accommodate only up to 8. So you have 2 plus 8, that's 10. And there is 1 electron that is left over in the outermost shell, right? So that's the structure of sodium. On the other hand, if you look at the structure of an atom of chlorine, right? For chlorine, the atomic number is 17, right? So there are 17 protons in the nucleus, right? And there are 17 electrons. Well, if you try to distribute out the 17 electrons, the innermost shell is going to take 2 electrons. Next one will take 8, so 2 plus 8 is 10. Then the outermost shell is going to have 7 electrons, okay? So what you observe is that in the case of sodium, all right, the outermost shell actually has 1 single electron, okay? It's like some extra electron that's sticking out, whereas the outermost shell in the case of chlorine is short just by 1 electron, okay? So the natural thing to happen here is for this guy, for the sodium atom to donate its sole electron to chlorine, and now both the sodium, whatever is left of that sodium atom, all right, and whatever happens to the chlorine atom, now they both have completely filled outermost shells, okay? So when the sodium atom loses 1 electron, right, because before losing that electron, the atom was electrically neutral. When it loses an electron, it acquires 1 positive charge, so it becomes the positively charged sodium ion. When the chlorine atom, before gaining an electron, it was electrically neutral. When it gains 1 electron from the sodium atom, it becomes the negatively charged chloride ion, okay? And this is positively charged, this one is negatively charged, so they are naturally going to attract each other. And so the molecule is held together by the forces of electrostatic attraction. All right, any questions? Again, I mean, this may be many years ago, but I'm sure you've seen that, otherwise you could not be here, okay? You would not have been able to jump through all the hoops to finally make it to this class. Okay? So this is the picture that is showing the formation of the electrovalent bond, all right, or the ionic bond. And it's an extremely strong bond that is held together in place by the forces of electrostatic attraction between the 2 oppositely charged ions, right? So this is the formation of sodium chloride or common salt. And you can, think of a lot of other examples where the same kind of thing happens. However, in organic chemistry, covalent bonds are a lot more important, okay? So atoms could also achieve completely filled outermost shells by sharing pairs of electrons, right? And the resulting bonds are called covalent bonds, right? And I give you some examples here. 2 hydrogen atoms. So each hydrogen atom has got 1 electron in its outermost shell, right? So 2 hydrogen atoms could share a pair of electrons between them to have a completely filled up outermost shell, and it'll form a hydrogen molecule. Okay, that's H2, right? Similarly, carbon has got an atomic number of 6. So if you look at the electronic distribution of carbon, in the innermost shell you'll have 2 electrons, then in the next shell you'll have 4, okay? But you need 8 electrons in this second shell in order to have a completely filled outermost shell. So this carbon atom, right, with these 4 electrons, it could share each of these electrons with 1 hydrogen atom, right, forming this gas methane, CH4, right? Right. Yet another example, right? Oxygen has got an atomic number of 8. That means in the innermost shell, you're going to have 2, and then you're going to have 6 electrons in the outermost shell, right? So it is too short of achieving the stable configuration, right? So what it can do is it can share 2 of its outermost electrons with 2 hydrogen atoms, forming water or H2O. So now we define, yes sir, yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yes sir, yeah, go ahead. Oh, see, yeah, go ahead. How about you 669, are you in this class? Okay. We'd welcome you in if you want to join, but what's the difference? In the case of, no, in the case of electrovalent bond, there is a transfer of electrons, okay? There is an atom that will lose an electron and become like a positively charged ion, okay? Some other atom is going to gain an electron, become a negatively charged ion. In the case of a covalent bond, they're just sharing them, okay? It's like you give me money, okay? That's like electrovalent, okay? But then you say, okay, let's just share this resource, okay? Okay, no donation is involved. Don't give anybody anything, just share, okay? Both of you use, like, see, if you have $1, I have $1, okay? If both of us are sharing, it's $2 for each, right? I mean, if we share, okay? If we donate, then it's different, okay? Then if you donate to me, you just have $0 left, I have $2, okay? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. No charge, yes, exactly. We will get to that, and that is very, very important from the point of view of organic chemistry, okay? I mean, we'll, at least, not just for organic chemistry, it is very, very important for molecular biology, okay? That's how our cells are made and, you know, everything functions, okay? The difference between having charges and not having charges can make a, you know, a really, really significant effect. I will get to that. Before today's lecture is over, I'll be able to talk about some of that stuff. All right, any other questions? And anytime you have a question, don't hesitate to stop me, you know, because I will be going quite fast and I have these PowerPoint slides. I've done it many times, so it won't be a problem, okay? Okay. Okay, so now we define valency. Valency is the number of electrons that an atom of an element must donate. If it is an electrovalent bond, must accept, right? Again, if it's an electrovalent bond, like donate would be in the case of sodium, right? Accept would be in the case of chlorine, like the example that I just gave, or share in the case of carbon and hydrogen, to form a complete outermost electronic shell. So based on this definition, we can say that hydrogen has got a valency of 1, because hydrogen shares 1 electron, okay, with another hydrogen atom, right, to produce the hydrogen molecule. So it's sharing 1. Carbon has got a valency of 4, because it can share up to 4 electrons, okay. So under the sharing, carbon is covered. Oxygen has got a valency of 2, right? Again, because it shares 2 electrons, let's say, with 2 hydrogen atoms to form water. Sodium has got a valency of 1 because sodium donates 1 electron to chlorine. Similarly, chlorine has a valency of 1 because it receives 1 electron from chlorine. So donate / accept / share, okay? Donate, accept is for electrovalent bonds. Share is for covalent bonds, right? Now, okay, any questions? Now each carbon atom, all right, we said the carbon has got the electronic distribution 2 + 4, all right? So it can share up to 4 pairs of electrons with other atoms, right? I mean, so in the example that we looked at, that is methane, CH4, there were 4 hydrogen atoms, all right? Each one sharing an electron with that carbon atom, right? So now, but that's not the only possibility. There are more possibilities here, okay? You can have what are called single and double bonds. So if you look at, so we talked about CH4, that was methane, okay? Similarly, you can have C2H6. See, two C's and then H6. In fact, that's the general formula for a hydrocarbon. It's CN, H2N + 2. N equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So if you're looking at ethane, okay, see, like there is a single, this bar denotes that 1 pair of electrons is shared between these 2 carbon atoms, okay? This carbon atom, this hydrogen atom share another pair of electrons. This carbon atom, this hydrogen atom share another pair of electrons. So altogether, this carbon atom is sharing 4 electrons with these 4 different atoms, okay? This is an example of a single bond where only 1 pair of electrons is being shared, okay? Between these 2 carbon, also 1 pair of electrons. Carbon, hydrogen, 1 pair. So this is an example. These are examples of single bonds. You can have a double bond when 2 pairs of electrons are shared between the participating atoms. An example would be this gas that is called ethene, which has the formula C2H4, okay? So here, this is a double bond, right, between the two carbon atoms, right? Two pairs of electrons are shared between these two carbon atoms, and then the carbon atom is sharing the remaining electrons that it needs to share with this hydrogen atom and then this hydrogen atom, right? So this is C2H4. Now this, from the point of view of inorganic chemistry, regular chemistry, it means nothing, okay? Who cares, okay? If this is one bond, this is two bonds here, who cares, right? In the case of organic compounds, it is very important because notice that these two carbon atoms, they can rotate about this single bond, right? I mean, you can rotate this, all the stuff on this, on the right hand side relative to whatever is on the left, you can just twist it around, no problem, right? You don't face any obstruction. Here, if you try to do the same thing, you have an obstruction because there's a double bond, right? So this causes what is called steric hindrance, and that can play an important role in determining the shape of an organic molecule, right, which contains a double bond. And there are lots and lots of examples of that, okay? And in biology, shape is everything, right? If somebody manages to go and change the shape of hemoglobin in your blood, right, you're finished, okay? You're not going to survive, right? Because hemoglobin has got exactly the right shape, okay, that is needed to bind oxygen. Because the role of hemoglobin is it picks up oxygen from the lungs, right? You breathe in, right? Oxygen goes to the lungs, all right? Hemoglobin, the molecule of oxygen is going to get stuck in hemoglobin, and then along with the blood, it is going to go to the different tissues and supply oxygen, okay? So the hemoglobin, if people with normal hemoglobin, their hemoglobin has exactly the right shape that is needed for oxygen to bind in there, okay? If you go and change that shape a little bit, like people who have the disease that is called sickle cell anemia, right? They don't have the hemoglobin with the right shape, so oxygen cannot bind efficiently, right? And it can be a deadly disease, right? Like people can die of that, okay? And we'll talk more about that later. But the point that I'm trying to make is that in molecular biology, if you lost your shape, you lost everything, okay? It's like if you lost your appearance, okay? I mean, your face is completely distorted, you pretty much lost everything. Nobody can recognize you, okay? If somebody wants to come and give you like $1 million, okay, your face is gone, they cannot recognize you, right? So you don't get the money. So it's the same thing because the way biological molecules recognize each other is through their shape, okay? So if the shape is a little bit messed up, it can cause catastrophic loss of function. And there are lots and lots of diseases where the shape got messed up a little bit and, there's loss of function. Yes, sir?
So here the double bond is organic.
Is what? Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a covalent bond, yeah. All right, any other questions? Yeah, go ahead. Double bond what? Fixed, I didn't. Oh, you mean go from a double bond to a single bond? It can happen, but something else will have to make that happen, okay? Yeah, this molecule is probably pretty stable, but there could be some other reaction that could change the double bond to a single bond. But it will become a different molecule. Yes, sir, go ahead. Yes, ma'am. You could have that too, yeah. I have not seen that, but I'm sure you can. You could be sharing 3 pairs of electrons. Steric hindrance. Hindrance means obstruction, okay? But steric means it's with reference to the shape, okay? So because of this double bond, okay, you cannot go and rotate, this right-hand side with respect to the left-hand side, right, like this, around this without twisting this thing, this double bond, okay? So that is referred to as steric hindrance. And that can play an important role in determining the final shape of an organic molecule. All right, any other questions? Okay, now we come to some interesting stuff, all right? See, in a single covalent bond between different elements, the two atoms usually attract the shared electrons to different degrees, right? So if it's a covalent bond, there is no transfer of electrons. So you're not going to have something completely positively charged, something completely negatively charged. That's not going to happen. But the two atoms of different elements, they may have different affinity for electrons, right? For example, oxygen and nitrogen, they attract electrons quite strongly, while hydrogen attracts electrons quite weakly, right? So if you have a hydrogen-oxygen bond, okay, hydrogen is a weak attractor of electrons, all right? Right? And it's a covalent bond. They're sharing electrons. Oxygen is a strong attractor. So guess what? Hydrogen will acquire a slight positive charge, right? While oxygen will acquire a slight negative charge, right? All right? So in a hydrogen-oxygen covalent bond, the hydrogen atom acquires a positive charge. Very small, okay? But if you have millions and millions of molecules, the effect can be quite big. while the oxygen atom acquires a negative charge. And as a result, the overall molecule will have an uneven charge distribution, and such molecules are called polar molecules. Okay. On the other hand, carbon and hydrogen, they attract electrons, in a carbon-hydrogen covalent bond by about the same amount. Okay. So there will not be any charge distribution over there. So they will be uncharged molecules. Okay. If you have compounds that are made of carbon and hydrogen, which are typically called hydrocarbons. Okay. So because oxygen and hydrogen have different affinities, the covalent bond between oxygen and hydrogen, there will be some charge distribution. So it's going to be a polar bond. Again, between nitrogen and hydrogen, nitrogen has got strong affinity for electrons. Hydrogen has got weak affinity, right? So there will be some charge distribution over there. Okay. On the other hand, the bond between carbon and hydrogen is nonpolar because there is no charge distribution. Polar covalent bonds are extremely important in biology because, if you have a molecule that has a charge distribution, then in addition to other interactions, that molecule can also interact by way of electrical forces, okay? Because there is, if you're looking at water, all right, hydrogen has got a slight positive charge, oxygen has got a slight negative charge, all right? So then this charge distribution would be able to, and that is the reason why, let's say some salt readily dissolves in water. Salt is sodium chloride, okay, that's an ionic compound, right? Sodium is ion and chloride ion, right? But water also has this charge distribution. So the sodium ion will attract the negatively charged thing on the oxygen, right? And that's how it goes into solution, right? And in fact, there is a hydrogen bonding between water molecules. Like, see, water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, okay? I said hydrogen has got a smaller affinity for electrons. So it becomes slightly positive charge. Okay, so the hydrogen atom, the two hydrogen atoms in a molecule of water will have slight positive charge. The single oxygen atom will have slight negative charge. Guess what? There are other molecules of water too. Okay, hydrogen atoms having slight positive charge, oxygen atom having slight negative charge. So they are going to interact with each other and they will form a hydrogen bonded network. Because the slightly positive elements will interact with the slightly negative elements. And I'm told, I don't know the detailed thermodynamical reasons for that, but this hydrogen bonding between water molecules is the reason that water is a liquid at room temperatures. Okay. Otherwise it would be a gas. So if somebody is interested, I'm sure this is well studied, well researched, but I'm trying to teach this and, make a living. So I'm not trying to answer the deep philosophical questions, but that is the reason, why water is a liquid at room temperatures. Yes, sir. Go ahead. Yes. No. The hydrogen bond is that is the bond between that. See, if you have water, okay, you'll have between hydrogen and oxygen, right? There is a covalent bond, right? The hydrogen acquires slight positive charge, right? Oxygen acquires slight negative charge, right? In each and every water molecule. Now the positively charged hydrogen on this, on one water molecule, right, can bond with the negatively charged oxygen on another water molecule. That is the hydrogen bond. Yeah, I should have clarified that. That is called the hydrogen bond. That's a weak bond, but there are millions of them, okay? So it can have quite strong effects. That is hydrogen bonding, yes.
Is the hydrogen bond stronger than
No, it's very weak bond. But there are millions and millions of them because each and every molecule in the water, they are linked up like that. Yeah. They are weak, but because the effect is over millions and millions of bonds, you will see some effect, at least in the context of biology, some good things will happen. Hopefully good things. Most of the time it's good things. Sometimes bad things can also happen, right? And we will be looking at examples of hydrogen bonding, right? Several of them as we go along, okay? So this is just the introduction. So any other questions? Now polar molecules will readily dissolve in water, okay, because they have this charge distribution, right? Water has this hydrogen bonded network, right? Positively charged hydrogen, negatively charged oxygen. So if you put in some polar molecule, it will immediately dissolve in water, okay? They will go into solution very easy, into aqueous solution. Non-polar molecules do not dissolve in water because they are usually made of carbon and hydrogen, okay? So they don't have a charge distribution. So polar molecules are usually called hydrophilic. That means they really like water. They like to go into solution in water. Okay. Whereas non-polar molecules are called hydrophobic. Like you can think of petroleum or oil. Okay, that is hydrophobic. You know, oil and water don't mix. Okay, why is that? Right. One is hydrophilic, the other one is hydrophobic. All right. So, but in the case of cells, in the case of living organisms, all right, what is exploited are what are called amphipathic molecules, all right, because they have some part that is water loving and some part that is water hating. Remember, I showed you last time in the class that if you throw a bunch of those molecules, they'll form this, you know, structure, right, the lipid bilayer. It's possible because of that, because part of it is water loving, part of it is water hating, right, and that is these amphipathic molecules are the building blocks for all cell membranes. Okay, so we are really built up at the molecular level. Okay, it's not like something is made out of big pieces or something. It's at the molecular level you're built up. You know, in a way where the cell membrane is made up of things called lipids, which are like these amphipathic molecules, and the interior of the cell is aqueous solution. Right. All right. Any questions? Okay, now starts the real review of organic chemistry, right? So let's look at some chemical bonds and groups that are commonly encountered in biological molecules, right? The first set of molecules that we are going to look at are compounds which contain only carbon and hydrogen, right? These compounds are called hydrocarbons, okay? It's an apt name, right? I mean, only carbon and hydrogen. And examples of them are methane, CH4, C single bonded with H, C single bonded with H. This is methane, it's a gas. Then another one is ethane, C2H6, all right? And the general formula is CN, H2N plus 2, all right? So if N is 1, it's CN, H2N plus 2 is CH4. If N is 2, it's ethane, it's C2H6, all right? If N is 3, it's propane, it's C3H8. If N is 4, it's butane, and so on, okay? And again, I mean, this is not a class on organic chemistry, so we are not going to go into, you know, the entire list, okay? But I'm just giving you a few examples. Now, if you go ahead, you have methane here. If you go ahead and remove this hydrogen from here, then you have what is called the methyl group or the methyl group, right? CH3 is the methyl group. This is a very reactive organic group, okay? You'll find it all over the place because you can link this up with any other organic molecule just through one covalent bond here, okay? If something comes and attaches as a covalent bond, you will have a methyl group attached, right? Same way, if from ethane you take one hydrogen out, you're left with this ethyl group, right? C2H5. And again, I mean, this can link with anything. As long as you can stick in one covalent bond here, right, you can link it with anything else. There could be a big molecule, needs one covalent bond. You just put the ethyl group, you'll have some compound with the ethyl group over there. Okay, any questions? So now we move on to compounds that contain carbon and oxygen, right? So compounds containing carbon and oxygen, the first among these are what are called alcohols. And they are characterized by the presence of the hydroxyl group, right? OH group. And alcohols will have the general formula R covalently bonded with the hydroxyl group, where R could be any organic group. Like on the last slide, I showed you R equals CH3 is the metal, CH3 is the methyl group, C2H5 is the ethyl group, right? So CH3, if you put CH3OH, okay, that is methyl alcohol or methanol, okay? That is the methylated spirit that they sell in all these, drugstores like CVS, and that is the alcohol that people should not drink, because if they do, they can become blind and all kinds of things can happen, right? In fact, in India, I know that occasionally, people go and drink cheap liquor, right? And you hear so many people died, and it's because people mix that methyl alcohol with ethyl alcohol is the one that people normally consume, okay? In wine, whiskey, and all that stuff. Yeah, go ahead. What's the what? Organic group is, this is an organic group. CH3 is organic group, right? C2H5 is an organic group, yeah. Like, remember, I had CH4, that was methane. I removed one hydrogen, I got a very reactive organic group, okay, that can react with other compounds. Okay, that's called an organic group. Okay. Like the alcohols are also organic groups. If you have OH, that is an organic group, right? The alcohols are characterized by the presence of this hydroxyl group, or OH, okay? Group means a class of compounds, okay, that have a particular feature, okay? So if you're looking at the methyl class of compounds, they will all have CH3 in them, okay? That's how they'll become methyl group. All the compounds in the ethyl class will have C2H5, right? Or in the ethyl group. Similarly, all alcohols will have the hydroxyl group, OH, and so on. Okay. Group means it's a group of group means just like the regular group that we talk about in everyday English language. Okay. So it's like a classification, all right, or a bunch of stuff that have similar properties. Right? So CH3 is methyl alcohol. C2H5, if you have C2H5OH, that's ethyl alcohol. I heard a story once about there's a guy that has retired right now. He used to work in, I think in the vet school or somewhere, and he said that there was a lab assistant who used to like to really drink a lot. Okay, and that guy fell sick because he had this methyl alcohol from the lab. He had to be hospitalized and all that. So. Okay, any questions so far? So now we move on to the next class of organic compounds that contain carbon and oxygen. These are called aldehydes, right? And they are characterized by the general formula R, C double bonded with O and H. So this is the group, C double bonded with O and H, that is the aldehyde group. So if R can be anything, it can be CH3, it could be C2H5, it can be whatever, okay? It could be even some other bigger molecule. But whether it's an aldehyde or not is going to be determined by the presence of this group. C double bonded with OH. So when R is H, right, if you put R equal to H, okay, then the compound that you get, it is what is called formaldehyde, okay. You may have heard of formaldehyde. They use it, I guess, in hospitals and places to do preservation, right. So that is formaldehyde. When R is CH3, right, you get acetaldehyde, okay. And you can have like C2H5 and so on, and other names over here. Okay, all kinds of aldehydes. But the idea in organic chemistry, you have a lot of different compounds and all that, but you can group things together under a particular group. Then you can study their properties, right, at the same time, because all the aldehydes will have similar properties, okay, no matter what groups you have. There may be some subtle differences, but there will be some major, just like in inorganic chemistry, you know about acids, okay, what properties they have. You know about bases, okay. So general properties, So here in organic chemistry, you classify them as aldehydes, alcohols, and so on. Okay. So any questions on this slide? So now we move on to the next class. See, that's why I told you that that you will have to do a lot of work. For me, it's easy to say, okay, but you have to slowly absorb this and remember it. Okay. Right, which one is the formula for aldehyde, which one is, not right now, but before the exam, right? You'll do it because people have done it before you. You'll be fine, okay? But there's work involved, okay? The next group of organic compounds are what are called ketones, okay? And ketones are characterized by the general formula. You'll have a carbonyl group, right? C double bonded with O is a carbonyl group. Aldehyde had that. Aldehyde had C double bonded with O, and then there was a hydrogen here. For a ketone, it's going to be C double bonded with O, and then there'll be two possible organic groups, R1 and R2, right? So, you've heard of acetone, okay, that's a ketone, all right? So carbonyl group is present in both aldehydes and ketones. And aldehydes and ketones are important because, as, human beings, as animals, we consume sugar, right? Sugars occur in nature as aldehydes and ketones, right? Okay, so for example, glucose is an aldehyde, right? It's an aldehyde, and it's a very, very important molecule needed for powering all our cells and our bodies. Okay, any questions on the previous slide? Yeah, that's just the way it is, okay? That is a ketone, okay? Now, I don't ask you why ketone is present in the world. That's the way it is, okay? The next group of organic, but again, we are not covering any more organic chemistry than absolutely needed to get to the molecular biology, okay? If you took a course on organic chemistry, they will cover all this stuff in a lot more detail. They'll probably provide you with an exhaustive listing of all ketones, all aldehydes, and so on, okay? Their properties, and maybe you have to memorize those, take tests and all that. We're not asking you to do any of that stuff here. Right, our goal is to get to molecular biology, understand DNA, RNA, transcription, translation, and so on, and then get to the engineering applications. So the next group that we are interested in are called carboxylic acids. Carboxylic acids are characterized by the general formula R. R is any organic group, and this is the carboxyl group. C double bonded with O, OH, right? Some people say COOH, COO or whatever, that is the group that characterizes the organic acid, okay? So when, for example, R, if this organic group happens to be just the hydrogen atom, all right, then you get HCOOH, which is called formic acid, and that's the kind of acid that you have in the jalapeno peppers and all that, that's the kind of acid that you have, right? That's why they are so hot, okay? Because that acid is there, right? And when R is CH3, right, then you get what is called acetic acid. That's the organic acid that is present in vinegar. Right? You buy some vinegar from the grocery store, you taste it, it's sour. Okay, that's because it has acetic acid. This is an organic acid. Organic acids are weak acids. Okay, whereas inorganic acids like hydrochloric acid and so on, they are very strong acids. Okay, and so next we move on to talking about the strength of an acid and so on. Okay. So what is an acid? And you probably already know that from your high school chemistry. Substances that release hydrogen ions into solution are called acids, right? For example, hydrochloric acid, if you mix it up with water, it is going to dissociate, right, to a very large extent to give you hydrogen ions and chloride ions, right? Positively charged hydrogen ions and negatively charged chloride ions. It's the presence of these hydrogen ions, these positively charged hydrogen ions, that gives it all its acidic properties, okay? Now, in the case of an organic acid, right, or carboxylic acid, those are weak acids. They do not completely dissociate. So you have R, C double bonded with O, OH, okay? So this is the carboxyl group. If you mix it up with water, okay, the reaction will proceed in both directions. You will get hydrogen ions plus whatever is left over, okay? But the reaction is also simultaneously taking place in the other direction also. So the concentration of hydrogen ions is not going to be very high, right? So this is going to be a weak acid. Imagine if vinegar had a high concentration of hydrogen ions, you'd get burnt, if you had any vinegar, right? It'll burn your tongue, your lips, everything, right? So because of this partial dissociation, organic acids or carboxylic acids are called weak acids, as opposed to, say, hydrochloric acid, which is called a strong acid. Okay. Hydrochloric acid is really strong. All right, ask you guys are too young to feel that, but ask anybody that has got stomach acid reflux problem, they will tell you how strong it is, right? Because that's when the acid doesn't stay in the stomach and it comes up, okay? And it can burn your esophagus and so on, right? So it requires treatment. All right, any questions? Now, the hydrogen ion concentration typically is measured using the pH value, right? So the pH is defined in this way, and we have all engineers here, so it's no problem, okay? pH is minus log to the base 10 of the hydrogen ion concentration, right? Expressed in moles per liter, right? So if you're looking at pure water, the hydrogen ion concentration in pure water is 10 to the power of minus 7 moles per liter, okay? So if you apply that formula here, minus log to the base 10, 10 to the power of minus 7, you get 7. So 7 is the pH for pure water, okay? In the case of acids, the hydrogen ion concentration is higher, so the pH will be lower than 7, right? In the case of bases, the hydrogen ion concentration is lower, so the pH will be greater than 7. Okay, again, no surprises here. For engineering people, it's kind of obvious once you look at this formula. But any questions? And the pH and all that is also important, because in the case of, cells, all right, the pH inside the cell has to be very tightly controlled, okay? Whether it's acidic, all right, or it's alkaline, that can make a difference in what is going to happen to the cell. Okay, what are bases? Well, bases are defined as substances that reduce the number of hydrogen ions in aqueous solution, right? So acids produce more hydrogen ions, bases will reduce the hydrogen ion concentration. For example, sodium hydroxide is a base. Why? Because sodium hydroxide, if you mix it up with water, it's going to dissociate into positively charged sodium ion and negatively charged hydroxyl ion, okay? Then this negatively charged hydroxyl ion is going to take up hydrogen ions from the water and reduce the concentration of the hydrogen ions, right? So that's why this is a base. So hydroxyl ions then react with some of the hydrogen ions in the water, thereby reducing the number of hydrogen ions. Similarly, ammonia, the gas ammonia is a base, because ammonia can take up hydrogen ions from water, right, to produce ammonium, the ammonium ion, okay? So it's reducing the concentration of the hydrogen ions in water, right? So the ammonia is the base. Now, we have all encountered acid-base reactions in inorganic chemistry, right? Oh, before I proceed further, I should mention that today I will not be able to have my office hours beyond 3:30. Okay, I have to go to another meeting, so I'm just letting you know. I've forgotten. I wanted to mention that right at the beginning of the class. That's only for today. But if you need to see me for some reason, just send me an email. I'll set up some time, maybe either tomorrow or on Friday. Okay. But there is this meeting that I have to just go to. Right. So now we are all familiar with acid-base reactions from inorganic chemistry. We know from inorganic chemistry that whenever an acid reacts with a base, it ends up producing a salt and water, right? For example, you have this base sodium hydroxide that reacts with the acid hydrochloric acid, right? A molecule of water is eliminated and you get common salt or sodium chloride, okay? These kind of reactions you have seen over and over again in inorganic chemistry, right? Now, in the case of organic chemistry, okay, we have, just like you have the strong acid here, you're going to have a carboxylic acid, right? It's a weak acid. Instead of a base, which usually has an OH group, you'll now have an alcohol, right? So OH from the alcohol, then this is the carboxyl group, right? So carboxylic acid, the two will react together. A molecule of water will be removed, okay? OH here, and then the two get linked together in this fashion, right? And this is like an organic salt, right? And it has got a name, it's called an ester, right? So an alcohol will react with a carboxylic acid, right, to produce an ester and water, right? And you can think of an ester like being an organic salt, okay? And in fact, in the structure of DNA, you have bonds like this. These are called ester bonds. There are many ester bonds when you're trying to build up a molecule of DNA. So we'll see all that later. We are doing all this molecular, all this organic chemistry for a reason, because it's going to be needed to understand the structure of proteins, DNA, RNA, and lipids, and so on. Any questions so far? Yes, sir. Go ahead.
So, can you remind me, maybe we have learned this one in high school, but I wonder what is causing this action to happen this way? I mean, there should be some cause or some force or something that.
Well, I mean, we'll talk about that later. What is causing the reaction to happen this way? Yeah? That has to do with free energy. Okay, we will get to it in a later chapter. Okay, because the reaction is energetically favorable in this direction. Okay, reactions will take place only in a direction where it is energetically favorable. All right, and we will discuss this in detail, I think, in chapter 3. Okay, because like if you have a piece of paper, okay, right, you set fire to it, it burns. Okay, and you get ashes and carbon dioxide and water. All right, so it's gone. But the reason it happens is because it's an energetically favorable reaction. Okay, if you try the other way around, you take all these ashes and carbon dioxide and water, try to make the paper, it's almost impossible. Okay, you can. The plants do that all the time. Okay, like they are taking energy from the sunlight, carbon dioxide and water, and they are producing sugars. Okay, and your paper is also kind of sugar. Okay, it's cellulose. All right. So it can be reversed, but then it requires more energy. So there are energy considerations at play. All right, any other questions? Okay, now we move on to another group of compounds, which are compounds that contain carbon and nitrogen, all right? Because in living things, nitrogen is there all over the place. So amines are organic compounds that are characterized by the presence of the amino group, NH2. So NH3 is ammonia, all right? You take that one H away, put in any organic group, that's an amine, all right? This has got the property of a weak base. Why? Because it's going to take up hydrogen ions in solution. NH2 in solution is going to take up hydrogen ions weakly. It's a weak base. So this is a reversible reaction. It will produce RNH3 plus, right? And so amines are considered to be weak bases. In fact, you may have heard of amino acids, all right, that make up proteins. That amine is going to be functioning as the base over there, all right? And then you'll have a carboxylic group that will be the acid. So that will make it an amino acid. And we are getting to that soon, and probably not today, but by Friday's lecture we'll get to it. Now an amine, actually we are already there, so although not in the context of protein. So here you have an amine, you got this amino group with some other organic group, right? You have this carboxylic acid that has got the carboxyl group, C double bonded with OH, right? And R1, right? Again, a water molecule gets removed between the two of them. You have OH here, you have H2. The water molecule gets removed, right? And now you have a linkage between these two guys, right? That linkage is called an amide linkage. It is linking up this R1C double bonded with O, got linked up to this NH2, right? Or NHR2 through this bond, okay? So this is called an amide linkage, okay? Again, we said amine is like a base, okay? It's like an alcohol or a base, right? Reacting with an acid. So this is like some kind of a salt you can think of, organic salt, right? This is the kind of linkage that you have in proteins, right? There is an amide linkage. And we'll do this in detail a little bit later in this chapter itself. Another important group of molecules that we'll have to look at are what are called phosphates, right? Phosphates are characterized by the presence of the inorganic phosphate ion, right? Which is derived from phosphoric acid that has the formula H3PO4 by the loss of 2 hydrogen ions. So you have H3PO4, that is phosphoric acid. It can lose 2 hydrogen ions and you get this ion with 2 negative charges. That's the phosphate ion, okay? Don't ask me why it's only 2 negative and not 3 negative. I don't know, right? But for some reason, it dissociates in this way, right? But my interest here is that this guy, okay, this guy is found all over the place in molecular biology. Because these phosphate ions, they can link to each other through certain bonds, okay? And that is actually the mechanism through which all our cells are powered. Okay? It's like charging and discharging a battery. Now let's look at some reactions involving phosphate ions. The inorganic phosphate ion, right? So this is H3PO4. It can react with an alcohol because this is coming from an acid. So it's not an organic acid, but it's an acid. Alcohol, right, is like a base, right? So the two can react. Water molecule can get removed, and you could get this larger compound being formed, right? So inorganic phosphate ion can react with an alcohol to produce a phosphoester, a phosphate ester, okay? And phosphate ester bonds, as shown above, they are important in the formation of nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA. And we'll see exactly how that happens, okay? But this kind of phosphoester bond is important. In fact, DNA is formed by molecules that are linked together by phosphodiester bonds, okay, 2 of them. All right. We'll see how that happens a little bit later. Another very important thing, all right, involving the phosphate ion is that you can have this situation, the inorganic phosphate ion, all right? No, I think, no, this is fine. Yeah, so you can have a situation where this inorganic phosphate ion can react with a carboxylic acid, right? C double bonded with OOH, inorganic phosphate ion. Again, a water molecule is eliminated, right? And these two guys are linked up together like this, right? And the compound that is formed in this way is called an anhydride because you took a water molecule out, right? Since it results from the removal of a water molecule. So it's called a carboxylic phosphoric acid anhydride. If you want to go back from this to this, all you have to do is just add water to it. Okay. So the reaction can go both ways. But the real important example that I was talking about is when 2 phosphate ions link up with each other. See, 2 inorganic phosphate ions can react together to produce a phosphoanhydride bond. So you have 1 inorganic phosphate ion, another inorganic phosphate ion. Between these 2 hydroxyl groups, you eliminate a molecule of water, right? You can see OH, OH, you're just left with that O, right? And you form a high energy linkage, okay? And this is called a phosphoanhydride bond between these 2 phosphates. This is very important because in cells, all right, this is a high energy bond. If you break this bond, you will release a lot of energy, okay? You'll release a lot of energy. And typically what happens in our cells, the way our cells are powered, is we have some molecule linked to 3 of these phosphates one after the other. Look, I mean here also if I wanted to, I could put in another phosphate ion. I could link 3 of them together, okay? And remember, these are high energy bonds. So 3 phosphate ions linked to some other molecule that we will encounter later, all right? It's producing a molecule with 3 with these 3 phosphate groups. So the way our cells are powered is that if you break one of these anhydride bonds, you'll release quite a bit of energy, okay? So you go to a molecule that is linked with 2 of these phosphate groups, all right? That's the low energy state. You charge it up, put in 1 extra phosphate, that's a high energy state, okay? So continuously every second in every cell in our bodies this is happening, right? This is how the currency of the cell is formed. Like all the energy you eat in food and all that stuff. Ultimately, at the end of the day, just like, no matter how hard you work, whether you work in McDonald's, you're doing TA, RA, I'm teaching here, whatever. Ultimately, it has to be in currency, right? I mean, it has to be in cash, in dollars, nickel cents, whatever the currency is. Same way in the cell, no matter what happens, ultimately the unit of energy will be in terms of these molecules. Okay, how many of these highly charged? So it's a molecule with 2 phosphates versus a molecule with 3 phosphates. You can even have a molecule with 1 phosphate. That is the lowest stage. Most of the time, the 2 phosphate one is going to the 3 phosphate one, higher energy level. When the energy, and then it's moving around all over in the cell. When the energy is needed, then the 3rd phosphate is broken off, and then the energy is extracted. Okay, so that's why this is very important. This phosphoanhydride bond, and we will encounter that molecule in detail a little bit later. I'm just trying to lay the basics. All right. I think let's stop here for today. So we are getting to the building blocks for common organic molecules like sugars, fatty acids, amino acids, nucleotides. I think by the time we finish the next lecture on Friday, right, we might even finish all of this. I don't know. Okay, but it's going to get at least by that time. I mean, if you haven't had prior exposure to that, you will know what a DNA molecule is. Okay, what a sugar is. Okay, how a sugar is linked together. Okay, what is glucose? Okay, and so on. Okay, so it'll be interesting. But you please do the work. Okay. Go and study whatever I covered, okay, again and again and again, because there is no substitute for, repetitive learning in this course, because there is quite a bit of memorizing involved, and I cannot help you with that, So.